All right, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Excited that you are here with us on this lovely Tuesday morning here on campus. My name is Dr. Juan Izaguirre, and I serve as the Director for Student Support Services Trio here at MCC. And welcome to some of you. Welcome for the first time. Welcome back to many of you to Metropolitan Community College's final Diversity Matters Film and Lecture Series program of the year. We will present to you the film The Long March, winding through a seldom told history of the Philippines and the United States. Celestino Almeda, Rudy Panaglima, and Feliciana Reyes find themselves inducted into the U.S. Armed Forces during World War II. After their service, Congress declared them and hundreds of thousands more to be, quote, not on active duty, end quote. These veterans were denied back pay, denied GI benefits, and denied promised citizenship. Today, Celestino, Rudy, and Feliciana's continued fight represents the tens of thousands of elderly Filipino veterans who remain unacknowledged despite their evidence of service. As judicial solutions hit a brick wall and all eyes turn to Congress, a long march asks the hard questions. Will America stand up for the values it claims? And will these veterans get the recognition they deserve before they are all dead? We'll find these answers out today in the documentary. And at the end of this, as you watch this film, please write down questions, write down comments. At the end, once we are done, we'll have a Q&A with Ms. Tammy, who will be more than happy to share her thoughts and why she produces, and of course, answer any questions from our audience. So at this time, we will begin our film. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for staying with us. And so for those of you who may have missed the introduction at the beginning, here on your, as you can see on your screen, we are joined by the director and the writer of A Long March, Tammy T.S. Botkin. Ms. Botkin has been producing for 7 years, including the award-winning documentaries Her Turf and Mary Jane's The Women of Weed. The directorial debut is the documentary of A Long March, which she created with a diverse crew under the guidance of the Filipino community. A member of the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania, Botkin's indigenous writing has garnered recognition as a second-round selection at the Austin Film Festival and a quarterfinalist at Atlanta Film Festival. She is a staunch supporter of diverse voices and women in film. Everyone, please welcome Tammy T.S. Botkin. And again, if you have any questions, please put them in the QA, in the question and answer in the chat for our moderator, Brian Kress, and I will help answer, I guess, propose those questions and save those questions for our guests. So thank you all. So Tammy, thank you for joining us on this wonderful Tuesday morning. You know, a lot of the times that we watch these films, it's often the voices of the unheard as we hear some of these topics, right? So how did you engage in some of these conversations? Or how did you hear about these unheard voices that prompted you to say, hey, I need to tell these stories for others to hear and inform others of what has transpired, to what's happening today and many, yesteryears with this marginalized population.
Sure. Hey, well, first I want to say thank you to Metropolitan Community College for sharing this film and for everybody who is here. So how this project came to me is those paintings were in my aunt and uncle's basement for 40 years. Vic, who is the old guy with the paintings, he's my uncle. And my aunt had passed away, and he's like, hey, we have these paintings. They're really gruesome. And, he would talk about them off and on for about 1.5 years. And I was like, these paintings, what is with these paintings? War paintings, gruesome. And I did not understand even what the Baton Death March was when it was mentioned. I was like, did they beat people with batons? So at some point, my cluelessness came to a head when he came for dinner, and he's like, hey, I showed these paintings at a Congressional Gold Medal ceremony, and there was a bunch of Filipino people there. And did you know we completely bleeped the Philippines during World War II? And I was like, no, I know nothing. So that was kind of my introduction, met with some local people who were representing Filipino veterans through philvetrep.org locally. And they had another ceremony coming up, and I said, can we bring the paintings back out and maybe a camera? And they said yes. And from the first interview, which is Frank Catallo, who was talking about his childhood and the offer to be purchased in exchange for 100 sacks of rice, I was a puddle on the floor. And at that point, I was like, well, hell or high water, I'm doing this. So that was it. That was my intro.
Nice. Well, thank you for that, because that was actually one of my questions of, with the paintings, how you came to see them, or and where are they now? So one question that we got from the audience is, are there any updates on the progression for recognition since the film was created?
Yeah, the Filipino Veterans Fairness Act went up again in October on the 31st of the month, I think. A last-ditch effort to honor Filipino American History Month. And it again was, right on the floor and goes into committee, and it's not expected that anything will happen there. Philvet Rep is working with Senator Hirono's office on a new piece of policy that is stronger than the Filipino Veterans Fairness Act. And it would call for the effective repeal of the rescission acts, which is kind of what the other one does. But there's $50 million locked up at the VA for these veterans. It would ask for the liquidation of that to create an education fund, as well as pay the probably 4,000 veterans who are still alive that have evidence of service. As well as to acknowledge the women who served, and asking for an apology from the President of the United States, kind of akin to what Reagan did regarding Japanese American internment in 1984, was that? A long time ago. So, yeah.
This next question is recognition. Did any recognition happen this year for our Filipino veterans?
There are pockets where communities get together and do some smaller ceremonies. One of the problems that's happened is, originally that Congressional Gold Medal, I think cost $55 for a purchase, and Philvet Rep had received grant monies to purchase many of those to hand them out. The price of those has since gone up. I think it's over $200 now. And Philvet Rep has moved from doing a lot of the ceremonies into offering education for like elementary, middle school age, to help bring this story into those classes, and start at an earlier age of including the Filipino contributions to World War II. So it's kind of a matter, I think, to have, if you know somebody, and this isn't just Filipino veterans, it's anybody who served in the U.S. Armed Forces during World War II in the Philippines. You can still reach out to philvetrep.org, fill out an application, and work with your community to bring another ceremony in, or possibly be engaged. I think annually they do a national level one that is, I think it's done on Zoom, I believe. So not quite the effect though.
For sure. And I think the video talked about this, and you just like hinted on this collaborative piece. Through your research, have you seen these pockets of marginalized populations, marginalized veterans coming together to say, our stories are similar. We have faced uphill battles of getting recognized for our service within the Army or with other branches. I think they've recognized the Tuskegee Airmen. They recognize some of the folks who were Puerto Rican as well in the film. Have you seen some of that stuff in your research, that they've come together to support each other, or Is there little pockets here and there that do come together to support each other and give voice to each other on some of these topics and issues?
Yeah, so that's interesting that I haven't really looked at the intersection of, like the Black GIs who were left out of the GI Bill, the women air service pilots, and I haven't seen myself an intersection, which doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It's just not something that I had been looking for. But there does seem to be an affinity among all World War II veterans that really just, there's such a solidarity. What World War II veterans went through together, what any service members go through together in any war, is typically just creates phenomenal bonds.
Yes.
I think the closest thing that I've seen around that is, I don't know how great of an I'm working on an American Masters project that features Senator Daniel Inouye, who we saw in this film, but he lost his arm. He was part of the 442nd, which is a Japanese American unit. It was a segregated unit as well. So I'm sure the affinity is there. I myself have not dug into that, but that's an interesting thing to think about.
Nice. So we had a few more questions. So was there a particular part of this research and film development that touched you more significantly?
Wow. Well, I think just first off, coming into this topic and being so oblivious. Thinking, hey, I'm a fairly smart, fairly educated person, and it's like, wait a minute, when did we have the Philippines? When was it? Why did I know this? Okay, wait a minute. I knew about Hawaii. I knew about Puerto Rico because they're still part of us, but I didn't understand the Philippine story. But I think one of the things, of course, that you can see that I really latched into or onto is Feliciana's story. Because that is as unrepresented as the Filipino contribution to the United States during World War II was, or to the planet for that matter. Looking at the women's contribution, Feliciana died before we got the camera to her. And it was devastating because when COVID hit, and it was just picking off our veterans left and right. We couldn't get cameras in. So we had another Filipina guerrilla who we wanted to interview, but she passed away too. So it was like how to include the voice of women who served when some of those guerrilla troops, 1 in 10 was a woman, and they were forces to be reckoned with. Figuring out how to really pivot in and tell her story. And we had originally slated to have Lou Diamond Phillips be our narration.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, through a conversation with one of my producers, like, how do we really, really make Feliciana live? She's like, change the narration to her point of view. And it's interesting because I've only had one Filipino person who told me, no, that sounds like my mom, I'm not listening. Most people are like, that's my tita, that's my Lola. I'm like, it really works. So I think just making sure she was heard, because she was just we're pretty sure the courts were going to rule in her favor, and that would have been a game changer for absolutely everybody.
Right.
She would have set a whole new precedent, but then she died, and which apparently is not typical. They just decided not to rule on it. Normally, because it had already been argued, they would rule, but they did not.
All right, and this question, one aspect that caught my attention is the common disenfranchisement experienced by veterans from minoritized populations. What are your thoughts on the future of ensuring fair recognition for all military veterans?
So It's interesting. I've been talking to some people at the Center for Minority Veterans at the VA, as well as the Center for Women Veterans at the VA, about doing a screening of this film. And individually, people at the VA are incredibly supportive. In fact, like the first time somebody from the VA walked up to me at a screening in person, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get killed. And they were like, oh, I work for the VA. And I said, yes, sir. What did you think? He's like, accurate. Thank you. He's like, yeah, I wish it weren't. So it's interesting because on an individual level, people want to see change.
Mhm.
We're stuck in this institutional loop of nonsense. And we're seeing this across our government right now, that we keep getting caught in these nasty loops that on an individual level, most of us do not like, but getting out of them. What is our hope here? I don't know that this really gets them to change their point of view on these veterans or anybody else. Of course, that's why we made the film.
Mhm.
But I will say we have also been quashed down quite a bit under a lot of other screaming happening out of DC, that makes it really, really hard to push these conversations up and forward.
Mhm.
And a lot of the response that we get on this film is, oh God, what did our government do again? And people kind of throw up their hands like, well, what are we supposed to do about it?
Got it. Mhm.
But that said, I still work very closely with General Taguba.
Mhm.
We kind of have a pact that if we're the last two people on Earth, we're going to be pounding on this. And General Taguba, if you're not familiar with him, became widely known in 2004 because he was the person who pulled out the report and exposed our crimes against people in Afghanistan, at the detainees.
Mhm.
And he spent his life within the US Army advocating for all minorities that were working in the armed service branches. And so as long as he's at it and I'm alive and we're in lockstep, we'll just keep working.
Awesome. Awesome. Are there any historical areas or statutes that recognize our Filipino veterans or specific to those who did not get this recognition thus far?
So there is an annual Baton Memorial Death March that happens at White Sands. It happens usually the third week of March. Um, and that is the biggest event that I'm aware of. I have not seen, although I do believe, it's various memorials. There are memorials for people in the Pacific, those who served in the Pacific. And I do believe that there is a one pillar for the Philippines, but specific to the Filipino veterans, those who lost their nationality status, who were not allowed to become citizens.
Mhm.
Um, I am not aware of that,
Mhm.
but there should be. In fact, the artist that we worked with to do our animations, Noni Cruzado, he and I have actually put together a whole pitch to do art installations that include the original World War II art, um, his art, possibly as a projected component, as well as an actual monument that we have spec'd out. Um, but yeah, we've set that out for a couple of grants and come back with um, not now answers, but we'll see what happens with that.
Right. And so as you know, as the director and the writer for this, we're often married to our work, right? You know, we're so, you know, sold on it. So you say some of this from the beginning where let me learn about these paintings to, oh wow, there's a lot more story. But can you walk us through the emotions of going through this and some of the learnings and I'm losing the words I want to use. But some of those learning objectives that you took from yourself, for yourself as well from some of these stories. But what are some of the learnings about these atrocities that you've researched, that you've heard from, you know, firsthand approach from some of the, what are some of those emotions that you've gone through in uncovering and doing this research?
So funny thing, this morning, I walked into my husband's office. He's my editor. He edited this. And I was complaining about another project and I'm like, why am I so freaked out and upset about this? And he said, it's because you're passionate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, yeah, thanks. And he's like, it wasn't a compliment. So basically, in order to do this work, I think you have to be very passionate. You have to be obsessive compulsive. I am pretty sure it falls somewhere in a category close to mental illness. Because, I mean, we saw so many areas of pushbacks. The number of times that the people closest to me are like, are you going to stop doing this now? Are you going to stop this project? Are you going to be done now? Will you let it go? And I was like, no, I like COVID. Yeah, no, not stopping me. You lost money on it. You know, you lost your donors. People are dying. I'm not going to stop. Going to pivot. You know, National Archives have shut down. You can't get the reels that you wanted ordered up. What are you gonna just keep pivoting? You know, and I will tell you, for a while it felt like when I learned the story, these service members lived in my dreams. They would say, it was like at night, just sitting around talking, and they're like, yeah, so we did these things, are we going to do this? And it was very, very bizarre. And I don't usually talk about this component of it either, but you know, at one point, you know, we've wrapped, we've locked the picture, we're getting ready to do music. I woke up in the middle of one night and was in a medical emergency, got to the hospital, and they're like, you have a tumor. And I was like, the first thought was, I haven't finished the film. We're recording the soundtrack in 2 weeks. You can't tell me this. You know, my husband's like, are you nuts? And I'm like, it turned out to be a bump in the road. I got the best diagnosis possible. It was an easy extraction, and within 2 weeks, I was back out. But I would say you cannot, when you're in my position, you just have to be all in. You have, just as those veterans were all in, they couldn't quit just because they had malaria. They had a battle to fight, and this, for whatever reason, has been a battle that I signed up for. I have an irrational love for these people. I have weird ideas of why that is, but also, you know, there is a part of my history. I have a tribe, you know, and I didn't know exactly how to work within those particular stories at the time. So this is also a conduit of just like that banding together and being like, we will be heard. So I'm not sure I answered the question. I think I went off on a tangent.
And that's all right, because I mean, I think, like you said, is that passion. I think we heard that passion in your response of that, you know, or even I think sometimes is that, but we're not done yet. There's still a lot more to do. And I think, and with that, when we think of it, this allyship kind of stuff, right? That we're bringing voices to this, we're learning more about this, and we're putting it to the attention of others. But what can citizens and others do to support the recognition of our Filipino veterans?
So I think the best things to do are to follow FilVetRep, FILVETREP.org. Start following, because at some point we are going to get above the crazy noise happening. And this is still going to be an issue, and we're still going to push forward on it. And so they're carrying the legislative piece. And then follow, it's on social media, A Long March Film, or online, www.alongmarch.com. I send out about one newsletter a month, hardly ever more, sometimes a little bit less, because I am the person who writes and pushes those out. Our social media is not generally too crazy. We do have some scheduled broadcasts on PBS coming up. They're not, you can't stream it. It is literally date and point in time. I think you could probably TiVo it, maybe. I don't know who does that anymore. So you could share if you're following on social. You'll see that we're cropping up here or there. Tonight, I think it's at 11 p.m. at night in New York City, has doing a broadcast of our 60-minute cut of the film. You know, we're still showing this film at colleges, within communities. If you email me or use the contact page through alongmarch.com, it's all coming to me. You're talking to me. And obviously, try and shut me up. I will I will talk to you. I will hear your ideas of what you want to do. And then more than happy to collaborate and figure out ways to further this. But yeah, as soon as that legislative piece gets locked down out of Hirono's office, we'll start structuring letter writing campaigns and other things. So
nice. I think that's all the questions. But to wrap it up, final thoughts from you on for us to know. I know some of that stuff you just said, but what final thoughts as we get ready to conclude our time on this morning.
This is hard work we do. And while it sounds or feels sometimes like this is an exceptionally divided country, these conversations penetrate much more than I think sometimes we imagine. And so I would just want to encourage everybody here, whatever the story is that you're telling, just continue to tell it, even if it's one by one. Yeah, just keep going. We'll get there.
Right. And I think, as part of this, the Diversity Matters film and lecture series is a lot of that, right? To listen to the voices, hear things, and sometimes it's uncovering our own research, and listen to some ideas or listen to a new point as professionals, as students who may be on this call with us. So Tammy, thank you so much for spending time with us, and explaining the thoughts and the stories and everything that we have, and, providing that passion for us. For our audience members, thank you for your participation on today as well. And we appreciate your feedback on the online evaluation, which you will see in the chat right now. And as you can see, our next event, we are having a historian, Sandra Reddish, present her research on the Japanese in North Platte River Valley on Tuesday, May 14th. Join us from 12:30 to 1:30 in person on the Fort Omaha campus in Building 10 in room 110, or view virtually on the link shown. Learn about first-generation Japanese immigrants, who they were, what they accomplished, and what impact they still have on Nebraska today. So almost a little tie-in to what we are talking about today as well. So thank you all again so much for tuning in. And please, please, please do the evaluation and provide feedback for us as well. And of course, Tammy did provide information for her so you can get in contact with her to learn more, or some more of the information to get current, remain current with what's going on with our Filipino veterans as well.